Welcome back, everybody, to the Alpha Jedi Podcast. We are extremely thrilled to have Rollo Tomassi with us in the house today. How are you doing, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming on. And for those of you that aren't aware, which I highly doubt is going to be the case, but for those of you who may not know, Rollo is one of the key figures in what has become known as the Red Pill community. He's also an author and is very, very extremely well versed in putting very complex ideas into terms that we can all understand. And so you have 3 books out presently. Is there a fourth one in the works in there somewhere?
Yes, there is. I'm working on book 4. Kind of my scene here, my I guess I should say my theme for this whole thing is I originally did The Rational Male, which was my first book, and I had really no aims to write anything beyond the first book. But then just the first book started really taking off, and so many people wanted to get involved, and so many people had so many questions, and so I ended up writing a second and a third, and now I've got a fourth one in the works. And what they are is they're what I call the Rational Male series now. So the first book is kind of like the foundation, or like what I like to call the rule book, whereas the books that come after it that are part of that same series, those are kind of like supplements that you should really read the first book first, and then you don't necessarily have to read the subsequent ones in any particular order. Just sort of I base that on what your particular needs are. So like I said, the first book is kind of like the foundation, and then the second book I wrote was called uh, Preventive Medicine, and Preventive Medicine was kind of developed from guys telling me that they wished that they would have had the Rational Male back when they were 20 or 25 or whatever, before they made the decisions that they did that really affected their lives. And so I centered that book on kind of like a timeline of what guys could expect from women at various stages of women's maturity. And so if you're a 18-year-old guy, or even, gosh, even if you're like a 16-year-old, even if you're in high school, there's something for you in that timeline, so that you can sort of understand what it is that women are looking for, what they're kind of going through, and how they prioritize their their needs. I don't say needs, but their desires and their wants as a woman at different times in their life. So I go through from, I think I started at 15 years old all the way up to 50 years old, and so that's was sort of to head off these problems that guys might run into before they run into them. And then the third book, which is now just turned a year old, I published it in July of 2017. That was more of I grew out of this request for guys telling me or asking me, when is the best time to introduce my sons to this work? When is the best time to, like, or if they're like they mentor young men in some way, and they want to introduce these young men to the red pill. It was sort of, it grew out of that want for to influence the next generation of young men in a red pill
Mm-hmm.
paradigm. And so that was what I based basically the first third of that book was based on sort of red pill parenting.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, it was more, I focused more on social issues from a red pill perspective, and using what I call the red pill lens.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth book that I'm working on right now is, and I think it's a really important book. It's going to be how the the red pill lens, uh, how the red pill lens looks at religion, and how
Mm.
religion and the red pill sort of interact, both in the past and in this era, and what we can expect from religion from a red pill perspective in the future. And so it's really kind of taking on a life of its own, because originally I started writing the outline for it with just the intent of reaching out to some of these guys in evangelical Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
and Catholics as well, and some, basically in Christian circles, because I keep seeing so much of what I call the feminine imperative
Hmm.
assimilating contemporary religion these days, and it just seems to me getting worse and worse, particularly with the Me Too movement sort of infiltrating its way now into evangelical Christian circles, and I shouldn't just pick on evangelicals. I mean, it's in Catholicism, and it's in other more mainstream religions as well. And so
Yeah.
once I broadcast that and I told everybody, I said, hey, I'm working on this book about religion. That's when I had a whole bunch of other guys wanting to help me with this book. So it's almost like a collective project for me now, because I got a lot of guys that want to help me from the perspective of whatever their particular religion is. So I've got a lot of guys who are
Hmm.
Muslims. I've got Jews, I've got Mormons, I've got Hindus, I've got Buddhists, I've got all kinds of people coming out of the woodwork to say, hey, I'm red pill and I'm Buddhist, or Islam has always been red pill, and let me tell you why. And they just want
Hmm.
to keep, they want to make sure that they sort of get their voice, put into the book, which is great, because to me, that's really what the red pill has always been about. It's been a consortium or an
Right.
aggregate of men's experiences, and this is a really good, I think, illustration of how the manosphere and how the red pill community has come together to share these experiences, and then to sort of, I guess, coalesce and to what we can hopefully turn into an objective praxeology, so that we can all
Hmm.
just basically understand intersexual dynamics that much better, because now we have a tool to help us do that.
Yeah.
Thanks to the internet.
And that's actually a really fascinating topic because I very distinctly remember when I first came to sort of the red pill and kind of had my eyes opened a bit and really started diving into it and learning a whole lot more about it. My first initial instinct and reaction was a little bit of a reaction to my background and where I came from. So I was raised in a primarily Christian religious background. And so, looking at myself, especially when I was younger and like in my college areas, I was as blue as the bluest pill ever, like that came in. Didn't go full white knightish, but still hardcore. And a lot of that came out of a lot of the interpretations from the way that we would practice sort of that Christianity growing up. And so I think that it's a very interesting and a very important topic to discuss and address, because there, being well red pill aware now, there's a lot that I can see through that lens, and I think religion can be a very helpful and very powerful tool. But on the inverse side, if you don't have an understanding of this red pill awareness, it's really easy to see how it's been sort of infiltrated and taken over by a lot of the blue pill kind of ideology. And I do agree with you that it's definitely becoming like much more prevalent, entrenched, and the interpretation of it is we're getting to that point where it's like this is how it's always been, when it's actually more of a recent paradigm shift over the last 60 years or so.
Yeah, I get a lot of that. Like there's a lot of guys, particularly in more fundamentalist religious circles right now, who really want to they want to have some sort of validity, or they want to have some sort of recognition for their particular religion or whatever. Because religion is a very private, very personal thing. It's like what you believe is the the reason for your existence, and any sort of anything, especially when you're putting yourself out there for the metaphysical or the supernatural or whatever else. You're really opening yourself up. You want to talk about guys being vulnerable? That is a real vulnerability. But I think that a lot of guys still also, if they're really true to their convictions, they want to go out and say, look, this is why I believe that this is true. And so when you attack that, and that's the best term I can really put that in is it's an attack. When the red pill or pickup artists say, here's the nature of women,
Hmm.
and here's the nature of the blue pill, and why the blue pill reacts, or why blue pill conditioned guys react to women in such a way, and then you try to pair that up with a religion of some sort. So that, guys don't want to have that ego investment attacked.
Right.
I use that word a lot, with that term a lot. It's actually a psychological term. I didn't make it up. It's called ego investment. And what ego investment is it's a personal belief that becomes so integral to your personality that if you attack that belief, it's literally as if you're attacking the person themselves. Mm-hmm. So if you're a Christian, you're a devout, convicted Christian or a Muslim or whatever other religion, and you attack even just articles of faith of that particular religion, you feel as if that is being part of yourself being attacked as well, because you have put yourself and invested yourself into that belief. And I'm just talking about that in a religious context, but a lot of people also put that ego investment into a lot of other things. We can certainly associate that with like politics. Mm-hmm. That's also an easy one. So if you attack politics or you attack the worldview, I guess, of a particular politician who shares the same politics as you, that's like an attack on yourself. And the same thing goes for feminism, and the same thing goes for women who are very invested in this women's studies, crap that they learned when they were in college, and mm-hmm. invested their lives really emotionally and intellectually and ego-wise into this belief. So when a guy like me comes along and writes a book like The Rational Male, that rattles their cages. And that is from the perspective of me talking about, intersexual dynamics. But when I talk about intersexual dynamics and how, like say for instance, the feminine imperative has assimilated modern mainstream religion, mm-hmm. that's an attack on that religion because they don't want to believe it could happen to them.
Right.
So, what happens after that is we get guys, or one of the most common things I get from guys who are offended by what I say from a religious perspective is that Christianity or Judaism or Islam has had that all figured out. We've always been red pill. Christianity has always been red pill. Judaism has always been red pill. Islam has always been red pill. And let me tell you why. Well, the problem is that in the modern church, no matter what that church is, I can point out to you various aspects of how it's been compromised. Mm-hmm. I mean, the faith itself has been compromised because people like to say, well, it's only the church culture. Well, no, it's not.
Right.
It's the church culture influences doctrine. And then what happens after the doctrine and the rituals and the belief, what separates, what separates a Methodist from a Lutheran? What separates Catholics from Protestants? I mean, if you're still talking about the same basic religion, but it's a different franchise, mm-hmm. what separates them is doctrine. And so what happens is once that doctrine is corrupted by the culture, mm-hmm. then within a generation or so of that doctrine being changed or shifted, that becomes the new faith for the next generation that comes to believe within that doctrine. And so that's how you get feminism wrapped up in modern evangelical Christianity. That's how you get mm-hmm. it wrapped up. That's how we get a pope like the pope we have today.
Right.
It's all about secular influence that comes in, alters doctrine, and then doctrine alters faith. And so, I mean, I get you. You didn't want to get into this too much today, but that's what I'm writing about right now. I'm glad you asked that, because that's really the depth and breadth of what I'm getting into in the fourth book.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting topic because it's the more I find that, I dissect the red pill and look through the red pill lens at the world, the more you see how everything is interconnected, where you have, politics, religion, even careers and everything. It's all sort of interlinked. And my last interview, I was talking with Sean Whalen, who's a great, awesome guy, total man's man, bearded, gun-loving, love America type guy. But, the conversation topic we kind of broached was sort of the sense of, in the modern political sphere, there's a larger sense that people want the government to start taking on more and more responsibility, and the government to start taking, doing more for them, which in a sense almost feels like, if you're looking at things through a red pill sense, we've seen that as our society becomes a bit more feminized or femme-centric, we're now looking at other positions of authority to start providing that provisioning sort of need for us on a grander meta scale.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's also an interesting topic, because I talked about this in the third book, And what I see happening with respect to women in government or women in politics, I mean, we came as close as we've ever come to having the first female president just 2 years ago. And so I've got a really great post. I don't know if anybody's read it yet, but I've got a really great post called "The First Female President."
Oh, I've read that one quite a few times.
It's not in any books either, and I almost wish I would have waited at least another 4 or 5 months before I released book 3, so I could have included that in book 3 because it would have been really relevant. But what I talk about in that is the interplay, I guess, between intersexual dynamics and our modern political process, at least in the United States. That's where I'm from, so that's what I have. It's my frame of reference, which is interesting because you look at a country like Germany, or you look at a country like the UK right now, or I think Brazil has a female prime minister, or maybe someone in Argentina, I think too. I can't remember, but I think it's not unheard of to have a female president or a female prime minister, but not here in the United States. And that, I think, is because of this. I think it's really a deeper conflict, and it's representative of the polarization between the sexes right now, which has sort of been coming to a head, I think, since the sexual revolution. And once the sexual revolution hit, it seemed as if that was the turning point, the milestone, I guess, as to when we were going to start prioritizing the needs and the wants, I guess, of women as the highest priority of our politicking. So, that we saw what was the first thing we see happen after the sexual revolution? Well, we have Roe versus Wade, and we have the divorce, no fault divorce comes out. And so that changed our divorce industry, which is what I should say, turned our divorce process into a divorce industry. There's a great book, or a great movie documentary called Divorce Incorporated that I would encourage anybody to watch, particularly if you're planning on getting married. And it will just show you just how corrupt and how much of a market or industry, a marketable industry, marriage and divorce and then remarriage really is in our modern society today. And that is one more reflection, I think, of just this shift to prioritize what women are going to find important for, what feminism and what women. I always kind of think, I hate to use feminism as sort of the catalyst for this. I mean, in a way, I guess it has been, but what I refer to as the feminine imperative is not necessarily feminism itself. Feminism is kind of like the active social arm of the feminine imperative. The feminine imperative is basically whatever is in the ultimate best interests of womankind, or what I like to call the sisterhood. And so what I see in our politics right now, which kind of came to a head in Trump versus Clinton, is that there has been this sort of battle, this struggle between supremacy between men and women. And I think really a lot of this is the result of having placed women's priorities well above that of any men's. And so now as a consequence, we have more women in college right now. We have more women earning degrees. We have more women in the workplace. We have more women earning more than their husbands than ever before. We have a consequent drop in the birth rate. We see women are 42% of births are born out of wedlock today, which of course we like to blame on men, but the fact remains that women are still, we encourage and reinforce and reward women for being single mothers, because there's no, if you can't be a career woman, then the next highest thing for you to be able to do is to be a single mother and to essentially remove men from the process. And really that's what we've been doing for a long time. And I think that, again, that came to a head in the last election because we thought we could, I should say that this element thought that they could finally remove men from political influence, and they found that they couldn't do that. And really that's one of the reasons why we see what Gretchen Carlson has referred to as the cultural revolution of women, which is also what I call the future is female element in society right now, and that's why they're so pissed off, and that's why we have the Women's March, and that's why we see pink pussy hats at every, even remotely related, march that we can possibly think of. It's always an excuse to promote that element. So
Right.
That's where I think we are as far as the politics are concerned.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've said it before, but there's sometimes when I read your stuff on your blog, and I'm like, all right, I think he's a little bit paranoid here, but like I'll give it a fair reading and keep an open mind about it. And then of course, 2-3 years later, it's like, nope, okay, he was totally right. He was spot on about it. And I think like in your post about the first female president, you definitely alluded a lot to kind of the Me Too movement and how that's evolved and what it's become today. And I think a lot of that stuff was, contained in that post 2 years before it really started coming out and coming to a head.
Yeah, and it's interesting is Me Too has been around for a long time. The hashtag has been around since at least 2006, I think. And nobody even knew about it up until about a year ago, or maybe a year and a half ago. And that's only because of the Harvey Weinstein thing that was going on. And it's interesting that for a hashtag that's been around since 2006, let's just say 2006, 2007. I mean, we're talking about what is that? Almost 9 years, 8 years, something like that. And no one's really thought anything of it until we have Trump in office.
Oh, of course.
Until things have come to the head that we have right now, and it's almost as if the future's female element of society has found a tool. It's like their dream tool. And honestly, I think that one of the reasons that there has been such a societal push for Me Too and why it's not going away is because they wanted to have some way to get rid of Trump. They wanted to say, like, if we can get enough guys, even if it's just allegations, but if we can get enough guys convicted of sexual misconduct, it doesn't matter if it goes anywhere. There just has to be a precedent set.
Right.
Because once they set that, then they can say, well, look at all these guys. They are all going to jail for, a sexual misconduct. And Trump said, grab him by the pussy. And so why isn't he, stepping down? Because all these other people have been convicted or are stepping down themselves. He should do the right thing. And it's I think really what these people thought was that it was going to be some means to effect kind of like a bloodless coup, to get him out of office, on his own. That we had Stormy Daniels not too long ago. Stormy Daniels just recently got busted for I don't even. Oh, she's divorcing her husband right now. I know that, and she got busted for some infraction, I think, in her strip clubs or something like that. And we don't want to talk about that, but if it's about Me Too, they invite her on The View and they talk to her as if she is just this powerful entrepreneur woman of the future.
Right.
Whereas if she had nothing to do with that, or even like a year beforehand, they don't want to have anything to do with her because
absolutely, she doesn't represent us. Yeah, exactly. She's
but they're happy to pick up on that because she's a useful tool, and Me Too is a useful tool. They're just basically what I call, and I've written about these since day one. They're social conventions. They're useful, operative social conventions, and Me Too is a very useful tool as a social.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of the funny things where a friend of mine sent me getting a smidge off topic, but he sent me a thing about when you're a kid, you want to grow up, you want to be Batman, but when you're an adult, you suddenly realize you sympathize a little bit more with the Joker, and that kind of reminds me a little bit of that. Really, I thought was one of my favorite movie scenes is a conversation in The Dark Knight between the Joker and Batman, where the Joker's sitting him down and is like, they need you right now, but when they don't, they'll cast you out. And that kind of feels a lot like what's happening here with a lot of these sort of social conventions. And it goes back to the point of I think you've mentioned it before, where feminists tend to eat their own, and Aziz Ansari is a prime example of that. It's when we need you, we'll use everything that we have after but as soon as we don't, we'll eat you alive.
Well, that's one of the reasons I'm trying to sort of, I guess, emphasize this a little bit more. And what I'm emphasizing is this idea of the sisterhood.
Mm-hmm.
Sisterhood über alles. So and people think, are you talking about Nazis? Because it used to be something über alles for Nazi. I'm like, no, that's not right. I look at it from the literal Latin term or roots, which is the sisterhood above all else, or above everything. And what I mean by that is that the feminine imperative is the highest prime directive of women, no matter where you are, whether you're in, whether you're in communist China or whether you're in Germany, whether you are even if you are in these quote unquote oppressive to female societies, the highest order of business is always the what best serves the sisterhood. And I've said this before. I said, if you take a woman like Gretchen Carlson and you put her on the same political show as like Rachel Maddow, you put them on there, you start talking about politics, they'll fight like cats and dogs because they don't see eye to eye, from their world views. But if I were to go on the same show and start talking about red pill truths and intersexual dynamics, they would band together, lock arms, and fight me tooth and nail because I'm attacking the sisterhood. And there's one ego investment that all women share. It's their investment in the sisterhood. So it doesn't matter whether a woman is of the same religion or not. They could be, completely different religions. That's why you see, Christian women wearing a hijab in solidarity with their sisters. They don't have any religious convictions with them. They just think of it as they want to stand by their sisters in another country or in another religion. And it is that, that's the priority. The priority is higher than their religious beliefs. It's higher than their political beliefs.
Yeah, we've seen.
It's just something that it's something I think that a lot of guys don't understand, because men are not as collectivist as women. Women evolved to be more collectivist, whereas men evolved to be more based on a meritocracy or competing against one another to involve themselves in dominance hierarchies. And that's not to say that there aren't dominance hierarchies amongst women, but it's that women have always had to depend on each other for survival in the past. And this is really still part of their collective psyche right now from our evolved past. And so we're seeing this filter its way into our political discourse these days. And so we don't take men seriously anymore, but we are seriously talking about things like democratic socialism, or socialism is actually being spoken about as if it's a desired thing. And I think really that is the result of the fact that women tend to be more socialist amongst each other, and they're very much more collectivists because they believe in that cooperation. Whereas if you take a group of women and you give them an amount of money and they're supposed to distribute this money amongst a group of people, they will always try to distribute it as evenly as possible. Whereas men will take those same resources, that same money, and they will reward it based on merit and based on performance. And that is another manifestation of the fact that women are far more collectivist than men will ever dream to be. And so I think it would behoove most men today to really pay attention to that, because that is going to define our political discourse, at least until we have our first real female president.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because there's a lot of similarities between sort of that collectivism in the political sphere. And, to help guys better relate this example, if you want to look at it, you can look at it more along like racial lines where, back in, I think it was 2008 when Obama first ran, and, the African-American community, there was a huge, huge amount of collectivism where it's like, hey, we need to get our first black president in there. Who cares what his politics are? We just need him there. That is more the fact that he's, got an arbitrary fact that's the same as the rest of us. That's more important and supersedes all. We need to make sure that this actually happens. And that was it.
I think it would have been interesting to see a black woman run against Obama back then.
Oh, I know, right? Oprah.
That would be a test of tribalism. And I think especially in this age where we have someone like Jordan Peterson, talking about individualism and the rights of the individual, and we're not wanting to be part of partisan politics. I completely understand that, but I really still think that there is a fundamental part of human nature that is tribalist, and it will always be tribalist, and there won't be any way to really get around that
Yeah.
For a very long time. And now I don't mean that in terms of strictly of race or ethnicity, but, or, you know, it could be nationality, it could be race, and it is also very much sex.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to, I would suggest that if there was going to be a runoff, I think, honestly, I think women voted for Hillary just because she was a woman, that they didn't care. I mean, because, I mean, really, I mean, I'm not a Trump fan. I've never been a Trump fan. I think he was the best selection between himself and Hillary, but I would have liked, you know, some other,
some other options.
But if you think about it, Trump was the only one who could run against Hillary, because Hillary was she was the character. She was what I call the effigy of the feminine imperative. She was the sum parts of the sisterhood, whereas the only one who had a chance of beating that character or beating that brand was a guy like Trump, who had the masculine energy behind him, and it had to be almost this parody of masculinity. It had to be this hyper super masculinity to go up against this hyper super feminist character that was Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, and it is really interesting and fascinating how, you know, we tend to, it's almost like a collective ego investment, right? Where, you know, we're collectively investing our ego, whether it's for the feminine imperative behind sort of Hillary Clinton, or for, you know, sort of the more, I guess, masculine side by throwing it into Trump. And so we very dangerously politicize all that, and it's really fascinating to watch it sort of kind of you know, play out on the national scale. So keeping on the topic of kind of where things are going, as far as the red pill itself, where do you see it kind of going or meandering or evolving over, you know, the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, I think that before I can even answer that question, you have to sort of define what exactly the red pill is.
Mm-hmm.
I have become quite the expert at repeating what I'm about to repeat to you here, because I have had to do this quite a bit, because there's such a confusion, I think, as to what is red pill and what is blue pill, and what, you know, because you have to sort of define your terms here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that recently, within, I would say, the last 3 years, the red pill as a sort of loose brand has been appropriated by whatever ideology wants to use it as such. And so the red pill becomes about the alt-right. It becomes about MRAs and their ludicrous documentary, you know, written by a feminist. And that's red pill, right? Okay.
Right.
Anybody today can call themselves red pill. In fact, I've heard some more liberal leftist people calling themselves the real red pill, because they're the ones that are supposedly have all the truth. So really what it runs down to is whatever that person's pet ideology is red pill, because they've always believed in it, and they're woke, you know, they're woke onto what's going on. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I share any of those particular, you know, ideas or ideologies. It's that what is red pill and what is not red pill. Now, for me, red pill has always been about intersexual dynamics and looking at I should say, as a result of this aggregate that has become what's called the manosphere, looking at the results of guys kind of coming together in this, you know, communications age and comparing notes. And, you know, I always say the red pill is sort of the love child of the pickup artist movement and evolutionary psychology, because those are the two elements that really came together to influence that, because pickup artists had game and that was the practice, whereas evolutionary psychology was the theory. So between the two of them, we get outcomes like MGTOW, or we get outcomes like MRAs, or we get outcomes like even the guys who are, you know, true force loneliness or incels or whatever. The alt-right. I saw this really bad documentary, like a very short documentary on CNN about some guy that had gone through, I don't know, my site or somebody else's site, who got himself into the red pill, and then as a progression of his exposure to the red pill, then he got into nationalist politics, and it had like turned him from this wonderful, progressive, multicultural, leftist, is for the best I can say, from that into this guy who was, talking about going to Charlottesville to go march, right? And so suddenly it had gone from red pill to white supremacism. And even white supremacists are going to say, well, we're the real red pill. It's like, so who's the real red pill? Well, to me, that's always going to be whenever Rollo Tomassi talks about the red pill, I mean it in terms of intersexual dynamics and understanding the importance, the very broad importance of intersexual dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
People like to delegitimize, I guess, the red pill, because they think that, like you were just saying yourself a minute ago, it's like he seems like that Rollo Tomassi guy is very reactionary, right? He's talking about Hillary Clinton and how that relates to red pill dynamics. And really, I think I even said this on Twitter a few times. I said this is going to be the first election that is decided by red pill dynamics or red pill awareness. And sure enough, and I hate to go back because it always sounds like I'm like, poking fun at these people, but it's like, it's important for people to remember that stuff, because it's like, I said this back then, and it wasn't because I was flying off the handle or losing my mind. It's because I was seeing how it dovetailed into a lot of the stuff that I've been writing about for 12, 15 years.
Yeah.
So I like a lot of the stuff that we're seeing right now, particularly with people appropriating the red pill. I've written about that. I wrote about that back as far back as 2011, 2012. I wrote a post called "Could a Man Have Written This?" And it was about how only women are allowed to write about things when it comes to, like, say, relationships, or sex, or they're always the sexperts, right?
Right.
They're always the relationship experts. Only a woman can talk about that, because if any guy talks about that, they're automatically a misogynist, because anything that, or they're mansplaining, no matter what you say, it's disqualified because you have a penis.
Right. Despite
I wrote about that, but I'm seeing a lot of this right now where, and this sort of relates to your question here, is I see this want to rebrand the red pill as whatever that pet ideology is. And then I also see this want right now, particularly on the part of traditional conservatives who want to also appropriate the red pill as their brand, but to sanitize it so that it works from within their ideology. So what I see them doing is they're kind of, it's sort of like pick and pull red pill. It's like, we'll take the parts that we like, or we'll take the parts that make men feel as if they have to live up to these expectations, or the burden of performance. We like that. We're going to keep that in there. Let's see. Let's talk about how men. Self-improvement. We need guys to talk. We need guys to be more of self-improvement. But then you go and you talk about hypergamy, or you go and that should only apply to women we don't like.
Right.
So this is traditional conservative mindset here. Is like, whatever is flattering to the woman, they keep. Whatever is unflattering about women, they throw that away and say that that's just those pickup artist guys, and we wouldn't want to be like them.
Right.
And then they'll say, well, if it's making men improve themselves and to lock themselves in with women's sexual strategies and being better men for women, then we're okay with that. It's what I call the Build a Better Beta project. Is they're okay with you being red pill so long as it's in the best interests of the woman, and ultimately you're serving God, country, and family, then that's okay. But they don't want to accept the parts of the red pill awareness that might convince guys that, hey, you know what, I like, for instance, mental point of origin.
Right.
I don't like to talk about that, because that means that you're taking womankind off the pedestal. And I have this saying that tradcons are basically just feminists who want it to look like a Norman Rockwell painting. They want it to look like traditional, Thanksgiving dinner, and to again back up and reinforce that ideology. And so it becomes this pick and pull thing. And I'm of the opinion that is pretty much what I call purple pill.
Mm-hmm.
People think that when I say purple pill, it's an insult. It's not an insult. It's an analysis.
Mm-hmm.
It's me looking at what you want to accept and what you don't want to accept. And then me asking questions like, why is it that you don't want to accept these things? Well, mostly that's because they want to go back to this comfy blue pill idealism that they've been sold on for a very
Mm-hmm.
long time. And they want to see if they can make red pill awareness work
Mm-hmm.
in achieving the goals that the blue pills convinced them should be possible
Right.
at the time they were 5-year-old boys. So
Right.
I see that. I see a lot of purple pill on the horizon. I see a lot of appropriation of the red pill as a term.
So
I think that in terms of politics, I can see we're going to work our way up to the point where the polarization, I think, between men and women is going to get so stark that you're going to see direct, open conflict between men and women, and it's going to. People are really worried right now. I think that we're heading towards like some sort of civil war. Or some people are I'm watching a lot of podcasts right now are saying that, you know, we're already in a civil war if you really think about it, where it's just a cold war, you know, nobody's firing any shots. It's just this war of ideology. And I think it's going to be really interesting when the red pill is forced to choose a side. And I think that because the red pill, as far as I'm concerned, is really in the benefit of men these days, because it puts that lens on guys that lets them see the game. You know, that's why we call it unplugging from the matrix, is because that matrix, that world that has been pulled over your eyes, that is what the red pill makes you aware of when it comes to intersexual dynamics. And it's so much deeper than just how do I get laid.
Right.
You know, it's so much deeper than just, you know, how to pick up chicks, how to have a girlfriend, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, when I talk about hypergamy, everybody thinks that I overemphasize hypergamy because I'm being reactionary or whatever. But then I'll go and I'll point to stories like that. One FBI agent who left her husband to go marry this ISIS leader who also happened to be a rapper.
Right.
And she was supposed to be. I wrote about her in a couple of different posts, but essentially, the understanding hypergamy would have warned the people she worked with to look out for this kind of stuff. She left her husband, who was also a military guy, left her husband to go not necessarily join ISIS, but this guy that she was supposed to be observing and you know, spying on. Essentially, she falls in love with the guy, and she decides to run off to whatever country, marry this guy, and then realizes her mistake, and then comes back to the country, gets extradited back to the country, and she's brought up on charges. But because she's a woman, we give her the pussy pass, and she doesn't serve any time. Or you look at something like, what is that? Elizabeth, what's her name? The girl who was the biotech chick that got busted for fraud. Forbes and Fortune 500.
Yeah.
I can't remember her last name for the life of me right now, but it's Elizabeth something or other. And anyways, that's another good. You know, if you knew something about the nature of intersexual dynamics, if you knew something about the nature of women's psyches, you know how and why she was able to get away with what she got away with for so long. Because as a society, we want to take the word of a woman as truth. Like we're told to. I mean, when it comes down to something as important as rape, we're supposed to believe the woman no matter what. We're supposed to suspend the right of habeas corpus for men if women are saying he touched me, or he sexually assaulted me, or he had some sort of misconduct. And even if it's just the suspicion or the allegation, we're supposed to believe it. And what does that do? That has a chilling effect one more time on the polarity or the polarization between men and women. So I think that the polarization that we're seeing amongst politics right now is certainly something to be aware of. But I think more importantly is the polarization between the sexes and how that works itself into that polarization between political ideologies and even religious convictions. How is that playing out? Like I just saw this video recently of this, I think it was a Catholic church in San Francisco, and I can't remember the name of it, but they had the Beyonce Mass, and they played all these Beyonce and feminist anthems or whatever. And basically it was this sermon that was given in a Catholic church that was meant to get the unchurched back into church. And so how are we going to do that? Well, we're going to preach to them the new religion of feminism. Mm-hmm. So we have the Beyonce Mass, and people were lined up outside. You couldn't fit enough people into the cathedral. And when you look at that, and now you're going to tell me that I'm reactionary, I have to say bullshit, because it's like I see all this. Just because I happen to be able to articulate it and see it doesn't mean I'm crazy. I mean, I was showing this stuff to people, and it's I hate it too, because I think I sound crazy. I think, oh man, if I say this, if I try to link this back to intersexual dynamics, or I have I've got a talk that I did at the 21 convention last year. It's called Hypergamy, Micro to Macro. And it sort of explains everything from women's ovulatory shift and how that influences their sexual strategies, all the way up to how that sexual strategy and how hypergamy influences our political discourse and the legislation that we're going to have. I mean, we have divorce laws that are directly related to hypergamy. We have why, and people call, and I just recently I've been getting myself into trouble about this, which it's my belief that abortion, and the reason that the high priority and the high importance that we place on legal, safe abortion is because abortion is the ultimate expression of hypergamy. Because nothing says he wasn't the right guy like the unilateral, uncontested, unquestionable, because we're supposed to believe women all the time, unquestioned power to end a child's life in utero, and to say, you know what, I'm not ready for a kid right now, and I'm going to abort this fetus because I need to be in a better place where I, really, what is that saying? Why does a woman decide to have an abortion? It's not because it's some political, I'm going to go make a political statement by having an abortion. That's not it at all. There is a latent purpose and a latent function behind why abortion is such a hot button topic, and why it's something that women will go to bat and will defend tooth and nail, because they don't want men to tell them what to do. They don't want to have men to have any part of the hypergamous process. And so we build laws around that. We build custody, child custody. We want what's in the best interest of the child. No, you want what's in the best interest of the mother, because hypergamy is the highest law of the land right now. And until we recognize that and accept that, nothing's going to change. I see all these MRAs trying to go, well, we need to start from the top, and we need to change these laws, blah, blah, blah. Like, first thing you need to do is you need to understand that, why those laws exist in the first place, and what it is, what insecurities those things are triggering in women. And I see that as the red pill is a lot deeper than just, how do I get a girlfriend?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and it's really interesting, because I think you touched on a lot of really good stuff there, and I think it manifests into a lot of different phrases. Like, you ask men and women, the opinions of, it's like single mothers, right? Like, should a guy marry a girl that's, a single mother? And for a lot of times with guys, it's, there's something instinctive in us where we're just like raising someone else's kids. It kind of just doesn't sit well on an instinctive level for us, whereas now it's, but if you ask a lot of women about it, it's like, no, this is your duty as a man, is to come in and be able to take care of and provide for this family, even if genetically these children are not your own. And if you have no desire to do it, you're, cast out as some monster.
Well, that's what I call the war on paternity. And again, I'm glad you brought that up. That's another manifestation of how we prioritize the feminine imperative and the sisterhood uber alles above everything else. And so, above even men's evolved biological imperative to know that a kid is biologically his kid. I've made this point before on a few other shows, where it's I always make the comparison where it's like most primates an alpha male primate that comes in and takes over a tribe of other primates, whether that's bonobos, our quote unquote egalitarian bonobos, which is a bunch of shit, or chimpanzees or gorillas, whatever. The alpha male will come into that group and it will kill the offspring of the rivals. Now, I'm not saying that we ought to do that, okay?
Right.
I'm saying we're human and we have a capacity for self-consciousness, and we have a capacity for, understanding and shit like that. So I'm not saying that that's the case, but what I'm saying is that there is that evolved impulse or that evolved need. I've gone out and I've quoted this research before, but there was this research of this study that they took all these kids and they put them all into I guess it was religious school uniforms, kind of like parochial school uniforms. And so all the kids are dressed the same, and all the kids are right about the same age, like maybe they're 7, 8, 9 years old, right? And they did this study of grouping all these kids together, just a gang of kids, right? And the parents are supposed to pick them up after school and take them home. Well, what they did is they had the kids, or they had the fathers and the mothers come in and pick out their kid out of the group so that they could put him in the car and drive him home, right? Pretty simple experiment. Well, the fathers could much, much more easily identify their kids by looking at the kid's face. Whereas the mothers couldn't do that. It took them a lot longer to figure out where their kids were. Whereas the guys would look and they would say, "Oh, that's my kid." They pick him up, Gavin, hey, let's go, that kind of thing. And that was just what I always thought maybe that's neither here nor there, but that left the impression with me that men have this subconscious, hindbrain, lizard brain understanding of how important paternity really is. And I think that is part of men's, what I call evolved mental firmware. It's part of our starter package when we are born. It's something that's part of us where we want to know that. And if we're going to push past that, it takes a really concerted effort on the part of society to get a man to not think about that and to not prioritize that, and not make that such a big deal. And what purpose does that serve? Why would we be trying to trick men into thinking that this evolved, function or this part of their psyche is wrong? Why would we want them to believe that it's wrong? Because right now, just what you were saying is like we want to reward these men for coming in and taking over the parental investment responsibilities of other men. And so if you read my second book, I talk about this in the second book.
I've read it.
The second book in the timeline for women is right about the time of their sexual market value peaks, right around 20. I'm just going to say 23. So about 23 years old until they get to be about 29 is what I call the party years. Might be a little earlier, might be a little later, but that's the party years. And really that is the best window of opportunity women have to explore their options when it comes to alpha fucks, the alpha seed side of hypergamy. And so they don't want to be limited by anything. They certainly don't want to be limited by anything like a committed relationship. And so, but as a result of that, oftentimes they'll get themselves pregnant, or many of the women who find themselves single mothers when they get to be about 29 years old have a similar story. And that story is they hooked up with the wrong bad boy who didn't commit. He got me pregnant. He's a deadbeat. He doesn't send the money that when I need him to. And I'm 29 and I'm now looking for a good guy. I'm now looking for the guy who wants to pitch in and be part of the team and really help me develop help me get my family going. Well, the problem is when those beta guys come on the scene, what they are doing is they're helping complete and consolidate that woman's sexual strategy, because now she has successfully bred with the alpha. Now what she needs the provisioning side of things. She needs that guy to not worry about paternity for himself, because a father is just a father no matter what he is and whatever he does, that kind of stuff, right? You just got to be a better, you got to be a better father, right? So
Yeah.
And what do? Well, you're taking over the parental investment responsibilities of a guy who she more than likely had sex with and enjoyed and wanted to have sex with again, and probably would have loved to have married if she could have locked him down. She could not do that. And so how do we remedy that problem? How do we remedy the other side of hypergamy, which is the beta buck side or the beta provisioning side? We need a man to come and step in, and we need him to lay down his imperative of knowing what his paternity is, and to just forget about all that, and to come in and help these single mothers out.
Or to quote unquote man up and do it.
Man up and marry those sluts. That's what it's called. And I don't necessarily agree with the sluts part, but it's man up and marry these women who and forgive them of their past indiscretions. Forgive them. I mean, that's a lot to ask. That is I don't think women really understand the gravity of asking even the worst beta guy. How dare you ask a man to basically pay for the mistakes that you made, that you wanted to make back when you were 24, 25, 26 years old.
Right, because if you flip this.
But here's how they dare. This is, how dare you? Well, this is how they dare, because they've been taught, just the same as the men have, that paternity shouldn't matter.
Right.
They've been taught the same. They've been taught the lesson that a man who steps in is a man. We're the only person, like today, we keep talking about like rites of passage and how men become men. Like back in the day, a man became a man because, if he was an American Indian, he'd have to go out into the forest and survive for X amount of months and come back to the tribe, and then he was a man, right? Or we have a bar mitzvah for men, and we have a quinceañera for women, okay, now you're a woman. And we had these points of delineation in a young person's life where they transitioned from being that kid into becoming a full-fledged adult. A lot of people still like to say that's 18, but it's not. And what the feminine imperative and the sisterhood does right now is they retain the right to bestow that manhood on guys.
Yes.
So at least they believe that they do. They believe that they are entitled to the right to say whether a man is a man or he's a boy or he's not. And so they'll say, well, a man steps up and takes responsibility for his actions. A man steps up and he takes responsibility for his children and stuff. Well, if we don't care about who the parent is, or if men are taught that paternity doesn't matter, he can go from being not a man to being a man by taking over the responsibilities of a guy who a woman probably had a real good time having sex with, that didn't have to jump through all these hoops that the beta guys would have to jump through. We're going to say that guy's a man because he's taking the responsibility for the guy who is still a boy, but that boy is successfully bred and is successfully probably moved on to another woman. So from a really Darwinistic sense, the alpha guy that she had sex with, who the beta is taking over the responsibilities for, that guy is an evolutionary success. Or the guy who is taking the responsibility, who's being cucked, for lack of a better term, is an evolutionary dead end, unless, of course, he has sex with her and they have a kid together on their own.
Yeah, and I think that speaks.
The facts of the matter is that the alpha is still bred before the other guy.
Right, and I think that speaks to one of the core reasons why I think, the red pill, from the sense of, red pill being intersexual dynamics, having a good understanding and grasp of that is so important and very essential, especially for guys, is that guys, we all go through a point where we do, want to feel like a man and understand what it actually means to be a man. That's kind of a core part of our experience. And we all have our different experiences where we can kind of go back and say, okay, this is the point where, I started thinking of myself as a man. But with a lot of blue pill conditioned guys, they never get that sort of internal validation. So they rely on women to, in a sense, knight them into manhood.
Yes, I dubbed the man,
Yeah.
And that's interesting. I've got, you probably read this post too. I've got a post called Rites of Passage, and that's in book 3. And I go into a little bit more detail about how, if you are unplugged and a red pill aware man, you need to sort of, even if it's just some stupid, simple ritual, you need to have some sort of delineation as to when you were plugged in and when you became red pill aware. And I really see that sort of as a rite of passage for guys right now. And I guess it's better late than never, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's interesting that we have deliberately erased this rite of passage. I think really this is by design. It's not just some accident that we want it. I see tradcons say this all the time. I think that these guys who are sitting at home with nothing better to do than have just sort of a borderline job, play Xbox, jerk off to online porn, eat a pizza and smoke pot, right? That's the guy who's just happy to go and just do whatever he's going to do. And they say, well, he's not a man, or he's not living up to his responsibilities. And that's interesting because when you say that, you go, well, what's his responsibilities? He's living a life the way he wants to live his life. Why do you care about that? Well, he's not building himself up to be a father or to be a husband or to take on adult responsibilities. And I can argue from a million different sources on how that's a bad idea as far as marriage goes today. I mean, there are a lot of things I agree with when MGTOWs talk about the realities of intersexual dynamics right now. What I disagree with them is their solutions to that. But I absolutely agree with them when it comes to what should define their. I think really MGTOWs are red pill guys with just different solutions. And I think that when I hear tradcons talk about that, and they want to say that those guys aren't men, they're boys, or they're extending they're perpetuating their adolescence. Well, yeah, why wouldn't they? Why would they bother doing it? And the incentive, it's been so de-incentivized, and then there's never been a point or a stage in their lives where they had to go through a rite of passage to become a man. So in their heads, they probably still are very much adolescents, and they still use what I call the adolescent social skill set, which is another essay of mine. And
it's also interesting because now it's becoming, and you've talked about this a lot before, but as hypergamy becomes a little bit more openly embraced, I think when guys are seeing what is my potential upside to, quote unquote, growing up and manning up and marrying somebody. I mean, as a guy, if you look at marriage in its current state, there's basically zero upside and 100% risk. Like, that's just what it looks like. So
it's 100% liability with 0% authority.
Correct. Which is, something that, guys, we're very logically oriented. So we see like, okay, we've got no upside here for us, but we've got a whole lot of liability, and there's a whole lot that we have to give up and forsake in order to pursue this. Why are we doing this? What's the point of it all?
Yeah, and also, yeah, exactly. Why am I bothering? That's what I call the disincentivization of marriage. People like to say that. Well, there's this, we look at the drop in marriage rates. It's like, well, there must be a marriage boycott, or men are on strike. It's like, no, they're not on strike. It's just, that's the most deductive, pragmatic thing for guys to do, is just to simply avoid that and not worry about those entanglements, because they see their friends, or they see even their parents, their dad have to go through something like that. And we also have the internet today. I mean, we all have this aggregate of all these experiences. And so, and as the world gets closer due to the internet, you're going to see more and more of this. I mean, like I was saying before, marriage rates are dropping off, and the people who are getting married later and later. And I think it was Ryan from the Redman Group was saying that in the future, he believes that only upper middle class people will be getting married, because nobody else will see the benefit of it. And I don't know what exactly will happen as a result of that. Maybe it'll just be more and more kids are born out of wedlock till we hit 50%, till we hit 60%. And then, who knows what happens in that generation. But like I was saying before, is these guys are never, they're never knighted as men. They're never saying, okay, now you are a man. And instead, women and tradcons take it upon themselves to decide when and when not to, bequeath manhood to a guy. And how do they do that? They do that because the guy is ready to somehow take on responsibilities that don't have his best interest in mind. You're a man if you
Right.
You know, you have kids and you go to work and you take responsibility for your kids and you make the payments and you do this or whatever. It's like that's what makes you a man. And if you're not that, then we're not going to give you manhood. We're not going to give you the title of being a man. Well, what guys who, especially a guy who's just fine to do his own thing, who cares? He's not. They don't give a shit about that. And you know, and then what's funny is like the TradCon set likes to use that as sort of this self-righteous, you know, crown that they wear because, well, I'm a man because I have a wife and I have 2 kids. And I was like, well, yeah, but okay, fine. You know, I've been married for 22 years. Great. But I've never once in those 22 years said, well, I'm a man because I have a wife and I have a daughter and I have two dogs and I feed my kids. You know, it's like that Chris Rock line. You know, it's like, you know, I take care of my kids. Yeah, you're supposed to. And that's the whole thing is like, it's something that's expected. Women expect that. They expect men to be there when they're in their epiphany phase, right around 29 to 31. They expect those guys to forgive their party years. They expect all of that stuff. And as you were saying, as hypergamy becomes more and more embraced and flaunted and triumphantly marched through the streets, guys are going to, you know, it's not going to take the red pill to convince guys that it's a bad deal. It's going to be women themselves. They're much better advocates for the red pill than I will ever be. I sound like this horrible misogynist. When women go out and demonstrate that, or you see it in a sitcom, or you see it in a movie, or you see it in the next commercial on TV, and you see open hypergamy, all you have to do is be sensitive enough to know that you're looking at open hypergamy.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's one of my best friends. He's comes from another country, and he's primarily a Buddhist background, but he's this country is much more Eastern influenced, so we'd have a lot of what I would definitely consider now, looking back on it, red pill conversations before I was even aware that it was a thing, and just sort of you know, I was always grateful for the friendship that we had, because one of the things he was definitely talking about is like, yeah, you know, I come over to this country and it's like I watch a show like Everybody Loves Raymond, and I wonder like how any guy could ever want to get married, because basically it's just this guy never being good enough for his wife and her having to deal with him. And if a guy's, you know, if you're a kid, you grow up watching that, what's your worldview going to be?
It's never ending qualification is what it is, and that's I think is one of the reasons why MGTOWs have it right, and that in that respect. Is it's this never-ending qualifications. You don't get to be a man unless women say you are. You don't get to be independent, or you don't get to say who you are, because the blue pill conditions you to place womankind, not just a woman, but womankind on the pedestal. And I in the 3rd book, I also say this is that our modern education, particularly early education, is entirely controlled by women.
Oh, absolutely.
You look at public schooling. I've got these. There's like a nice infographic that I've been passing around on Twitter, and I think it is 77% of all teachers in public education from kindergarten through college, 77% are women, and they're raising the next generation of boys to be, you know, as if they are defective girls.
And no one's screaming for equality to get you know.
Nobody's for equality there. Nobody cares about that. But they've got this. So consequently, you have this generation after generation of boys who don't make themselves their mental point of origin, but rather they make womankind their mental point of origin, and that's how you get these poor sucker kids in, you know, high school who go and shoot up the high school because they don't know how to deal with rejection. They don't know there was no man to teach them masculine, you know, conventional masculine discipline, and how to snap back from a defeat, and how to come back from rejection, and to learn that rejection is better than regret. Now we've got these kids who are shooting up their school, and they're realizing that they're regretting that, and oh wow, you know, regret is a whole lot worse than rejection. And I you know, in this day and age, I think that's one of the reasons I wrote the 3rd book, was because I really wanted to reach out to red pill parents and kids, you know, the younger generation at least, and say, look, this is what you're lacking here. This is going to be a dangerous thing, particularly in a coming social order that is based on a polarized idea of what men and women should be.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the current generation and the generation behind them upcoming handles a lot of this, because on the one hand you have the hypergamy that's been just running as rampant as possible, like unlike we've ever seen before. But on the other hand, with the accessibility to information, now there's actual dedicated resource centers and information that people can seek out and actually find what it is to help explain and make sense of everything. And that's been more accessible than ever. So I think it's going to be extremely fascinating to see how those 2 points counterbalance each other out, and what comes of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think that going forward right now, a lot of people are saying that they're starting to see a scenario develop where men in the red pill community, at least in the red pill, as far as I understand it, are going to be coming into the mainstream. I don't necessarily think that is really a good idea, because the mainstream corrupts everything.
Oh, absolutely.
And like, just the mainstream media is always going to tell the story that they want to tell, and they're always going to use you for whatever character they think you're going to be most useful for.
Yeah, which is something that happens every time Roosh goes on and does an interview or something.
Yeah, because they want crazy. And so what do? They look for the foaming at the mouth red pill guy who is this, classic misogynist. So it's easy to understand. And that's what they want. They want easy digestibility. They want fast food information. And the easiest way to do that is to find the crazy guy. Find the guy who is so out of touch with humanity. And what that does is it helps that set who needs those easy answers. It helps them reaffirm their role in society, because as bad as things get, I'm not like this crazy son of a bitch.
Yeah, and I think that's a real shame and tragedy, because I think the core of the red pill is just having this understanding and awareness of intersexual dynamics, so that way you as a man can understand what's going on and better yourself, so that way you can experience the best that women have to offer. And I think a lot of guys that are new get confused, where it's not about bashing women or saying that women are evil and that men are so much better. We're actually just saying that, hey, this is how the game is. Here's how you can play it. It's not necessarily a value judgment. We're just saying this is how it's laid out. Do with the information what you will.
Well, and it takes effort. I think that's the problem. Is like it's easy to cast me or Roosh or somebody like Paul Elam, who has crazy eyes, and I was like, oh my gosh, this guy he's nuts. He's a misogynist. Can you believe this? Boy, I'm glad we're not like that, right? So that's easy to understand, but what's hard to understand, and what takes time and effort to educate yourself about, is intersexual dynamics. It takes people always give me grief about my book, saying, you use $10 words, and so a lot of this stuff is really hard to wrap your head around. I'm glad more and more people are having an easier and easier time with that, but especially in the early days, I've been at this for 16 years now, and it's like I can remember a time where I was like, I'm not going to dumb down what I'm writing, because first of all, I want to give my readers more credit than writing to them as if they're on an 8th grade reading level. But I understand how things need to be concise, and people need to understand, I've made an effort to do that in my writing ever since then, but it takes effort. And a lot of people are simply intellectually lethargic. They don't want to put out the effort necessary to really get an understanding of it. And a lot of people, I always say that, unplugging guys is like triage. You have to say,
oh yes, it is,
and move on to the next guy, and read Last Rites for the Dying. And like I've learned, particularly, and I'll tell you, Twitter above all has taught me this, is like there's just I've learned to identify the people who might have a chance to reach. I might have a chance to reach. And I just other people that they're just there to yap, to troll. I've always wondered, why is trolling so appealing? And trolling is appealing because it's an easy fast food way to reaffirm those ego investments we talked about in the first part of this show. It's easier to have that pat on the back and get that dopamine hit. I've been really kind of researching and studying the idea that social media and the companies like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and the big ones that we know about, they hire individuals to help them make their services more addicting, and literally addicting in the sense that they are addicting in the sense that like slot machines in a casino are addicting.
Mm-hmm.
And what really kind of piqued my interest about this is because in my real life, in my other life, my real job, I have been the art director for several large casinos. And I understand exactly how this works because I was actually part and parcel of that for a while, trying to get more people in the doors to gamble more and get, technically get addicted to gambling.
And it's like what Ed Lattimore, in one of his recent tweets, what he tweeted was that Netflix is, the number one entertainment medium, and their next biggest competitor is sleep. Like, that is just mind-blowingly wild, where it's like literally the physical need of sleep is the only thing you compete with when it comes to taking people's time.
I've worked for casinos, and I have worked for, I won't say the name, but I've worked for a company that creates and builds and markets electronic slot machines. Like, they don't even look like slot machines anymore. They're just basically gambling, colorful, bright video, poker video, slot machines and stuff. And I understand the necessity to make them addictive. We look at something like was it World of Warcraft or these MMOs, right? And we wonder, when they first came out, we wonder, well, how come people aren't smart enough to see that they're getting addicted to these things, and how come they not, they don't realize what they're doing? Well, we'd never, as a species, we'd never encountered anything like that. But there are people in those companies, and there are people at those social media companies whose only job it is to increase engagement, and increase engagement is a euphemism for get them addicted.
Get them hooked.
Give them that dopamine hit, because that's the same thing. That's one of the reasons that one of the ways, I guess, that gambling addicts get addicted to gambling is they get a dopamine hit every time that prize comes out. And it's very and another thing is this goes back to my appeals, I guess, to my behavioral psychology side of things for me, because I have a degree in behavioral psychology, and it's interesting to me to see how this gets played out in not just social media, but also in intersexual dynamics, because women naturally understand the mechanics of intermittent reward and reinforcement. They understand operant conditioning without ever going to one single class of behavioral psychology. They understand this naturally because they have one thing that men will always want and they will always be addicted to.
Yep.
And it's interesting to me. I know I've been reading and watching a lot of stuff online about how social media actually plays on a lot of the same psychological dynamics as gambling addicts do.
Yeah, and what's interesting about all that is that it really is just reinforces the idea of why understanding intersexual dynamics is so critical, especially as a guy, is because women already have a very innate understanding of it. Women are actually naturally, they're just much better players and better at everything like in that front than guys are.
Because they start earlier, because
right.
They already, when they're little girls and they understand that little boys want something that they have, they might not even understand it's their sexuality or whatever. They just want to be liked by little girls.
Right.
They're constantly rewarded and reinforced for that. And again, that's operant conditioning, and they realize that they have at least some sense of control over that. And then, what I always say is attention is the coin of the realm in girl world. So if they can get boys' attention, that makes them a little bit higher in the peer clutch that they're a part of. And I think it's interesting because we talk about how guys can get addicted to porn, to get addicted to online pornography, and how ubiquitous porn is. I mean, you can go. I have a device in my pocket right now that I can go online and I can see sex acts amongst people that only Arab sultans had a chance, or like Caesar had a chance to see in Roman orgies or something like that. I mean, this is something that think about it. We've only had this capacity since what, 2000, maybe late 90s, right? To see hardcore porn. I remember when I was like 10 or 12 years old. I mean, if you could steal a Hustler magazine,
right?
You were cool, man. Hey, let me borrow the magazine tonight. That kind of shit.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal. And now it's like kids, a 12-year-old kid would be like, I just go to Pornhub, or just go to X videos or whatever, whatever they want. And so they have this introduction to sex at such an earlier age, and not just like the centerfold in a Playboy. I mean, we're talking about sex acts.
And it's interesting too, because now it's so proliferated. It's like, well, if I want to see a left-handed midget having sex with a 400-pound clown, that's exactly, then like you can find it out there, which that's also going to be a really interesting thing to see, how we develop and evolve, in upcoming generations. Because
the other part is that is also plays again on that same addictive dynamic that social media plays. But we will run men and boys up the flagpole for getting addicted to pornography, or for for entertaining that side of their psyche, because I always say that the male imperative is, or the masculine imperative is unlimited sex with unlimited access to unlimited sexuality. That is the male imperative, whereas hypergamy is the female imperative. But these guys will berate them and call them boys because they get addicted to porn and all this other stuff, but yet we don't berate women for the ego inflation and their sexual market value inflation that they get from social media,
right?
And so I it's my belief that, and I'm one of the reasons I've been studying this for a while, this addictive quality of social media, is because it's my belief that women's brains are being rewired just in the same way that men's brains are being rewired with porn, what theirs is with social media. So when it's Instagram, they get the dopamine hit from all the likes that they get on their Instagram photos.
That's actually,
they get all the girls on Facebook. Well, Facebook is actually kind of old hat now. My daughter says Facebook's for old people. Now it's Snapchat. Now it's Instagram. Tinder is becoming a big one right now. I mean, there's a lot. I wonder what the next really super addictive social media platform is going to be. But again, it's that dopamine hit. Guys get the dopamine hit from jerking off to porn. Women get the dopamine hit from Instagram, from getting likes on there.
Yeah,
it's so bad. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I just had, in the last couple of days, I get in trouble on Twitter for being as honest as I possibly can here. But somebody had posted a picture about this guy who was taking a selfie. He was taking a selfie of his girlfriend on a beach. He looked down the beach and he saw 4 or 5 other guys doing exactly the same thing, taking a picture of their girlfriend or whatever woman that they were with on the beach or in the water or whatever, so that woman could then take that shot and put it on Instagram and get likes for it. And each one, and you read, the way that you know this is because they're all using their cell phones. Right? They're not using a digital SLR. They're using their cell phones to go and set this up. And there's a whole, I don't know if it's a blog, but there's this whole subset of I think maybe it's a forum or something like that, of guys who have their pictures taken while they're taking pictures of their girlfriends or their girlfriends' friends, where they're like all in a hot tub, and then the poor sap beta guys, they're trying to take a picture of all of them, and of course he never takes the picture, right? And I'm never going to get likes because of you, and that it's rewiring that dopamine hit is rewiring women's understanding of themselves.
That's actually a really fascinating point that I'm glad that you brought up, because what I was discussing this literally the other day with a friend of mine, because he just got out of a relationship, and actually 3 other friends. So I've had like 4 friends total that just got out of relationships. But the common thread between all of them has been, when I was with this other person the entire time they were on their phone and were obsessed with Instagram, Snapchat, and social media, and it was just driving me crazy because what are we doing? Why are we hanging out? It's why every date winds up being a triple date, which is me, you, and your phone. And so it's actually a really, really fascinating point that you brought up there.
Yeah, I know a lot of guys right now that as a result of this, I think one of the things that's going to hit the manosphere pretty soon is going to be sort of these, what would you call it? It would be fasting. They're going to go internet fasting. They're going to go social media fasting, so that like they're going to go offline for a week, or they're going to, like, for me that would be very, very difficult. Because that's the only way I have to engage with my readers right now, is to be online. It's like I don't go on Twitter to look up what other people are doing. I go on Twitter just to interact with the people who want to talk to me. For a very long time, I had my DMs were open on Twitter. I had to close them recently because I had so many robots. Guys will set bots after you, Twitter bots after you, to basically waste your time. And it took me probably about a week and a half to figure out that I wasn't interacting with a human. I was interacting with a bot. And that is what sort of set me off on this path to go and look at how we get fooled by this and how we can become addicted to that. I mean, imagine if somebody's you got a Twitter bot that's like telling you the things that they want to hear. They're almost always in like this broken English, or they're barely able to thread together a coherent sentence. But imagine not having the ability to sort of parse that out and say, is this really a person?
Right.
Because you're getting that dopamine hit every time, and you feel good about talking and interacting with that person, even if it's not a real person.
Right.
And I don't know. I think that it's really important to sort of dig and to tear this whole thing. I'm always about looking under the hood. I was never happy enough to like know that if I turn the TV on, it just comes on and I'm okay. I'm gonna watch TV. I always wanted to tear the TV apart and see how it works, and I always wanted to tear it apart and put it back together, or see if I could put it back together again, because I want to know how things are built. And I feel the same way when it comes to intersexual dynamics, and it comes to the social dynamics that are manifesting as a result of that intersectional dynamics. And now we're adding technology that is just so rapidly advancing that we're not ready for it. We don't have the capacity to handle it. And that's why we're seeing all of these videos right now exposing how Facebook has, psychological professionals on staff to teach, to teach you, or to teach themselves how to basically addict people to Facebook.
Yeah. And also what's interesting with the large social media platforms is that there's definitely a interesting guided social narrative that's definitely being more written, where a lot of people that express opinions, the shadow banning is definitely a real thing. I have quite a few friends who routinely wind up in Facebook jail or Twitter jail or whatnot, and to me that's kind of tragic, because the original purpose of this whole thing was to allow for freedom of expression, freedom of thought. But we're seeing that clearly if you don't fit within the narrative, they're going to ban you.
That is being replaced with the value you have in terms of engagement. Now, what would be easier? Would it not be easier for Twitter to simply just ban you and just say, okay, you're done, you're off? That's what they did with Milo. They just kicked him off. They said, okay, you're no longer welcome here. Screw you, you're out, right?
Yeah.
Now they don't do that. Why? Because your value as somebody who can sustain engagement on Twitter is more valuable than just actually kicking you off, particularly if you have a large following, or if you are like, for instance, you got a celebrity. I'm just going to throw out Chris Pratt right now. Chris Pratt's a movie star, but he holds some pretty conservative values and some opinions, and he's not afraid to express those opinions. Well, if he were to be if he weren't Chris Pratt and he had half as many followers, it would be very easy for Twitter to just kick him off, or to just ban Chris Pratt, even himself, just ban him off there. But why don't they do that? Why did they shadow ban instead? Because first of all, they don't want the bad press for being the ones to kick off Chris Pratt, but they also understand the value Chris Pratt's name has when it comes to engagement. So it's not about an actual ban anymore. You have to do something pretty bad to get banned off of Twitter now, but they're happy to shadow ban you because they still need your name. They need your name and they need your pull.
It all comes down to money at the end. All right. Well, this has been this has been an absolute, fantastic conversation. We're approaching the hour 30 mark. So for the sake of time, we might cut this one a little bit on the shorter side. But yeah, for anyone out there that is, wants to learn a little bit more about red pill dynamics, or even is like considering, thinking about getting married, because I think a lot of guys like the idea of fatherhood nowadays, but they don't necessarily like the idea of actual marriage. What bits of encouragement or words of wisdom would you have for those guys out there?
Let's see. I mean, first I would say I'm not against marriage. Okay, I think that's the first thing is I need to you got to make this clear. Is I'm not against marriage. I'm against never saw it coming. I couldn't believe she did this to me. How could I have been so stupid? She turned on me. That kind of marriage. Okay, I think that if a guy, I don't think that marriage in and of itself is a bad idea. I don't think monogamy in and of itself is a bad and inherently bad idea. I think that how it is presented today and what the institution has devolved into today, I cannot say, hey, go out there and get married, guys. It's a great thing. You're gonna love it. I can't say that because the way that marriage is structured today, it is all downside for men. It is like I was saying before, it is 100% liability and 0% authority. It's all about, it's what I find interesting. I've taken him to task on this, is that Jordan Peterson is always about dominance hierarchies. Men dominate. The lobsters had dominance hierarchies. We have that kind of stuff. But all that shit gets thrown out the window in a marriage, and suddenly the dominance hierarchy is replaced with this egalitarianism that outside of marriage he would run up the flagpole and say it's not about egalitarianism or equalism or any of that kind of stuff. But marriage happens to be some sort of magical framework in which all of that doesn't apply. I'm saying that, guys, if you're going to get married, you need to be red pill aware before you do. I would say that the progression should be like this. You should go to school, get yourself, decide, go to high school, get yourself squared away as far as what it is that you feel like your strengths and your talents are, and go after that. I don't think that even college is not necessarily for everyone, although we want the industrial complex that is our college system right now. The only way to have a real sustainable future is to have a degree. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I don't also necessarily agree with the fact that all anything but STEM diplomas are useless. I don't believe that. I think it just kind of depends on what your strengths are, and that's the hard part, is having somebody to help you with that and having somebody to mentor you and sort of discover what your strengths are and what you want to go after. And that takes some time, and that takes introspect. And you can't do that if you're jerking off the porn, and you can't do that if all you're doing is staying at home and not engaging. You have to engage in life. And so I think that once you sort of figure that out, you need to be red pill aware above anything and everything. You need to be red pill aware. Don't get into a monogamous relationship until you are your late 20s to early 30s, somewhere around there. And then don't get married. Just do that for the experience of being with somebody in a committed state. Until then, practice non-exclusivity. Spin plates. Don't be a dick about it. Don't be you don't have to be a player. You don't have to do any of that. You don't even necessarily have to sleep with every one of your plates. It's just that you make a commitment to yourself to be non-exclusive up until such time as you think that you're ready for it. And the way you know you're ready for it is because you are red pill aware and you understand what you can expect from women at whatever particular time of their maturity is, and what you can expect from yourself. So understand that that you're not going to know who you're going to be until later on in your life. Also understand that women's sexual market value peaks way before yours. So when you see women enjoying all these great party years when they're, 23, 24, 25 years old, understand that your first best time in your life, your sexual market value peak is going to be much later, because it takes more time for men to develop value, to really develop equity in themselves, and to understand that, that when women are at their most necessitous is when you will be at your peak value. So when you're, say, 34 to 35, 36 years old, and a woman is 29 who's, a bit younger than you, she is going to be at her most necessitous, because she's at her epiphany phase. And she's going to want to know that there's a guy out there who is a proven commodity, that she doesn't have to take a chance on. Hypergamy does not like doubt. It's based on doubt, but it does not like that doubt. It wants to know that a guy is made, and it wants to know that a guy has something already built. She don't want a guy that has something going for him. She wants a guy who is already there. And that's why women always want to have a guy who is 5 to 7 years older than them, because that gives that buffer of time, those buffer of years, sort of allows that guy to prove that he has done something with himself, and he possesses the commodity the commodity of sexual market value that she needs. I'm telling guys, understand that you will be in later on, at some point in your life, you will be at a position where you will be doing the selecting, and they will be the ones who will be performing for you. And a lot of guys don't like even me saying that, because first of all, it sounds like I am advocating for marriage. I'm not. I'm just saying it. Remember, your most selective years are going to be your sexual market value peak years. It's not going to, guys want to say, oh, well, it's going to be when I'm 25, 26, I'll be in my best physical condition. Yeah, you might be. But if you stay in good shape, you will have more going for you when you are done with school, when you have started your own business, when you have traveled around the world a little bit more, when you have more experience, when you have the elements and the aspects of your character and your history and your background and everything about yourself that adds to your value. Women's value is primarily based on their looks and their sexuality. Simple as that. Any ladies who get upset with me over that, what I'm saying is the truth there. For guys, there's so much more to that. It might be that they are really good looking guys and you still might get laid, but you're still not going to have the value of a guy who is older than you, who has made more of himself than you. I'm not saying that you're not going to, if you don't have looks or if you don't have this, you're screwed. You can't, that's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you need to understand that in the future, you will be in a better position to select than you are probably at the moment that you're talking about now. So building yourself up, and remember, I would have a different message for guys who are, like, say, in their 40s and they're getting divorced, or they've gone through all of this and they're trying to make the best of a bad situation. You're asking me is what advice am I going to give, like, the future generation?
Yeah.
I'm not saying that marriage is intrinsically bad. I think that the reason that we have the advancement of humanity to the degree that we do is because of monogamy. But that is decaying, and it has been decaying since the sexual revolution. And that's another thing I would say is guys need to understand that we are in a period of decline right now with respect to the value of men, the intrinsic value of men. And but the silver lining of that is that it has never been easier for a guy to make more of himself and to outshine other guys right now, because so many guys are blue pill and so many guys are completely clueless. We talk about this all the time about how we have this lost generation of boys who are looking for father figures like, Jordan Peterson or Tony Robbins or whoever else to sort of point them in the right direction. Well, why is that? Well, because we're in this period of decay right now. We're in this period of we don't know what masculinity is, and we don't care to know about what masculinity is, because masculinity is icky, and I don't want to be a macho asshole, because if you say the word masculine, just you saying it makes you an asshole, right? So we have,
because it's toxic.
It's toxic, and so we don't want to have any part of that. But yet, on the same token, on the next breath, we're going to wonder why we seem so rudderless in our lives. So understand that. Also, I was going to say is that like I said, marriage is not necessarily a bad thing in that it brings men and women together. I think men and women are better together than we are apart. But I think that has some caveats to it. Men and women are not equals. Men and women are not egalitarian equals. You are never going to have an egalitarian relationship. You can have a good complementary relationship. And by that, I mean that your strengths are going to make up for your wife's weaknesses and vice versa. And to accept that you have a gender role, and to accept that that's a natural part of how you were born and what you were born into, and the structure of your brain and the structure of your hormones and the structure and how those hormones affect your behavior. And that behavior then affects what your expectations are of a man or a woman. And I think that men and women are better together than they are ever going to be apart. I mean, men and women were meant to be complementary, not adversarial. And what makes them adversarial is this preconception that men and women have to be these blank slate equals. And they have to be egalitarian equals. It's like we're just the same, except we have different plumbing. No, it's bullshit. And we're finally starting to sort of come to terms with the fact that men and women are different. But we based our society for so long on the idea that we're blank slates, that we can just be anything we want to, and that we just get in touch with your feminine side, get in touch with your masculine side. What happens when you do that is you become these sort of sexless, asexual, homogenous, androgynous things. You're not a man, but you're not a woman, and you're not a woman, but you're not a man. You just become this sort of thing, this sexless thing. And that doesn't. One thing that nature hates is it hates that stagnation, and that's what homogeny leads to. It leads to stagnation. That's why we have such variety. That's why we have sexual reproduction in the first place, to increase variety, to increase differences, because it's in those differences that allow us to adapt to different environmental things that are happening in our world. So yeah, the dinosaurs died out, but some other animals lived. Why? Because they were different animals, because they weren't all the fucking same. Okay? Right. To adapt. These ones mutated in some way so that they had an ability to adapt. Okay. So the thing is men and women are different, and that's a good thing. And men and women are not equals, and that's a good thing. And there never will be blank slate equality to begin with, simply because the world is not a vacuum. We don't live in some, test chain. We don't live in an experimental laboratory. We live in the real fucking world, and the real world demands change, and it demands an ability to adapt. And if you cannot do that because you're the same as the next guy, you're fucked, and you're going to go extinct just like the dinosaurs did.
Yep, and I think that's no, it's very well put. And I think the point of we're not the same. We are different, but that's a good thing, and that we're complementary. I think that is a really, really key point. That is one of the huge takeaways of understanding intersexual dynamics, is that men and women are extremely complementary to each other, and there's a lot of good that can come out of it.
I get into trouble with that because like a lot of guys still, even in the red pill community, really want to cling to this egalitarian idea of MRAs are fantastic about it. They hate it. When I say men and women are complementary, they're not equals. If I was to say that to Paul Elam, he would run me up the flagpole for that, because he still believes in the lie that feminism is about equality, and that MRAs are going to be the ones to actually implement real equality and gender parity. You're not going to do that. Why? Because men and women are innately different from each other. So there will never be blank slate equality. So it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I always, I'm a car guy, so I relate things in car examples, and I was breaking it down for one guy. I was like, well, the red pill, in a sense, is kind of like it's like racing school, where, a lot of guys, they see that, Ferrari or race car, and they think, oh, that looks really awesome. But if they were to just get in it, and all they've done is ever driven Toyota Corollas, they aren't going to be able to get the maximum performance out of it. They actually are going to have a really uncomfortable time, and they probably are going to have a really miserable experience. And so by going to racing school, understanding the different dynamics, where to hit the lines, how to actually properly manage all the different power and everything, you can actually get the most out of it and have an actual good time doing it. And so I think that's very important to understand with the red pill, is that it's, about improving
A lot of
yourself and understanding how things work.
like I said, I get into trouble with that complimentary stuff because a lot of women think that, and feminized guys think that the red pill is only about misogyny, or they think that
Right.
it's just about guys wanting to be dominating women. They think, oh, you want to
Right.
be dominant, you want to extend the patriarchy. No. And the other thing is, I don't think that men and women are doomed to be separate from each other. The feminists do,
Yeah.
MGTOWs to a degree do, but
Yeah.
it's my opinion that we were meant to be complements to each other. Even if you look at brain scans of men and women, and you look at how men's architecture compares to women, it almost looks as if they're supposed to be complements to one another. And the things that men have a natural proclivity to, women do not, and vice versa. And so we're better together than we are apart. And it's really strange for women to hear me say something like that, because they think that I'm all about tearing down women. I'm not. I'm about tearing down this idea that, men and women are these blank slate equals, but I'm not about the idea that men and women can't live together and we only have to just tolerate each other. I think we would be better off together than we would be apart, but we need to accept those differences. We need to accept what is a strength for masculine strength and what is a masculine deficit. And
we have to see the objective truth, which is, that's the beauty of the red pill, is that it breaks down, how women operate, how men operate, but it just breaks down how we operate, even when it seems rather unflattering towards the other. And I think that's becomes a bit of a problem when you look at things through too much of an emotional lens, is that it's like, well, this is unflattering, so I'm going to reject it, and it's wrong, and and this offends me. But, well, hey, it is what it is. It's guys, we'd like to think that we're super noble and we have no faults, but no, we do a lot of really terrible things. And guys, we are, women are not somehow more magically evil than guys are. Like, men and women, we're both equal in that regard, where we can be equally terrible to each other, or we manifest things in different ways that are very harmful or not helpful to each other. So it's just taking that honest look at how we both operate and seeing those differences. But by putting those together, we can actually drive some really deep, truly meaningful experiences.
The point of the red pill is not so that you will hate women. It is so that you will not hate them for things that they can never be.
Right. But I don't know if we can top that note. So I think on that note right there, we can conclude this episode. But if people want to reach out or find you, you're going to be speaking at the 21 convention again this year.
Yes, I will be at the 21 convention in Orlando, Florida. That will be October 11th through the 14th. As of this recording, I believe there are 34 tickets left. I think we're going to sell 200 of them. I'm dead certain it's going to sell out. We are in a bigger venue than ever before. It's not the same one that we were at last year. So if you went last year, it's going to be at actually a larger hotel and convention center. And it's getting way big. I mean, it's getting so. This is finally the event that I thought that it could become. Ed Lattimore, I know you've had him on the show before. He's going to be there. If you want to find out more about it, you can go to my site. I've got a post on there. I got a little sidebar link there, so you can click on that and find out all about it. And like I said, I would definitely buy tickets now if you're on the fence about going to this. It's a red pill summit is what it is. I mean, it's the guys who are talking there, and it's not just me going up there and talking for an hour. You get access to me. You get access to guys like Ed, AJ Cortez.
Christian McQueen will be there. Goldman.
Yeah. Goldman will be there, and there's so many guys that are going to be there. And like I said, last year I spoke for 2 hours. I did 2 1-hour talks, but I think I probably spoke for a total of 72 hours because I was just walking between events and walking around in the hotel or going to these after hour things or meeting people in the bar, having dinner with people, and just talking about stuff with guys in between talk. I mean, there's so much going on that I think I talked more outside my actual talks than I did on my inside talks. And there's a lot that goes on in the periphery too. Like there's things that like Goldman and Christian McQueen might take some guys out to go clubbing or something like that. There might be some other workshop type things that are going on as well. So it's not just the one thing, but if you're thinking about going, definitely go or check it out through my website, or just go to 21convention.com.
So yeah, you can check. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there.
Yeah, that's it. And you can find my blog is therationalmale.com. You can find all my essays and all my work there. That's where I do most of my stuff. If you want to find me the most, it's on my blog. I produce at least one blog post per week, talk about new things. You can find me on Twitter. I am Rollo Tomassi @RationalMale. I have 3 books available on Amazon. If you just go to Amazon and you type in The Rational Male, you'll find all 3 of them there. And I also do the Red Man group, which is a group of guys. Usually we have anywhere between 4 and 6 guys talking about pretty much red pill anything, whether it's current affairs or just general principles. We just recently, in the last couple of 3 shows, we've had call-ins. So we're now doing live call-ins for questions and stuff. So we're trying to turn that into like sort of the go-to red pill podcast for people who have questions, or who people are just now discovering this kind of stuff. So we do that. And then every Friday morning, I go on the Pat Campbell terrestrial radio show, and just look on my Twitter feed on a Friday morning, and that's when you'll find out when I go there.
All right. Well, sir, it has been an honor and a privilege to have you on. And for those of you, you should definitely check out his stuff. That will do it for this episode. So thanks again for coming on, Rollo. It was an absolute treat to have you.
Great. Thanks for having me, man. It's been fun.
If you like this podcast episode and you want to find out more, please subscribe to my YouTube channel or to my SoundCloud channel for more podcast episodes. Or for more content from me, you can follow me on my blog at alphajedi.com, or you can reach me at Twitter, which is at @the_alpha_Jedi. And again, I want to thank each and every one of you who already is a subscriber and a listener for tuning in and checking out the podcast and checking out my content. I greatly appreciate each and every one of you. And it's truly humbling to see that you all find value in what it is that I have to say. So thanks again for tuning into this episode. I will see you all in the next episode. Cheers.